It begins with a rectangle of light in a dark hallway. An elevator car closes, and a young woman stands alone inside. The camera above the door watches her the way a clock watches a room. The car rises. The floor indicator ticks through levels in a steady rhythm, then falters for a breath, as if the building itself were holding something back. That short ride will later be described as the last clear image in a file that investigators will come to call her last minutes, the Hotel Doorman case. The hallway outside the elevator is clean, almost staged. No sound, no rush of people, only the soft smear of a maintenance bucket abandoned near a service door. In the footage, the woman keeps her eyes on the changing numbers as if they matter. They do, because the question becomes simple and ruthless. If the elevator carried her up, why did she never come down? And if the building shows one version of itself to guests and another beneath the skin, which version swallowed her? There is another question, just as sharp. What does it mean when a space inside a licensed hotel doesn't match the plan in the city files? When a door opens onto an in-between place, a landing that is not on paper and not on the fire map by the stairs, who created that space and why? The city is a maze of stone and glass that likes to pretend it has no secrets. Locals call this quarter the Pražný District, a sheet of old cobbles along the Vltava River where tram lines hum and cafe windows fog on cold mornings. The hotel at the center of this story sits on a narrow street one turn off the main road, wedged between a bookstore that never seems open and a bakery that is always open. It is a mid-range, modernized place with a set of brass handles that look heavier than they are. Tourists choose it because it promises safety and routine. Business travelers choose it because it is quiet and the lobby never asks questions. Pražný City wears charm like a winter coat. Beneath the coat are utility shafts, laundry courtyards, and service corridors where staff move like currents. There are maps for the public and maps for the engineers, and they do not always match. The hotel is a small version of the city. Its guest floors stack cleanly, each one with the same hallway length, the same carpet, the same framed prints of bridges. Behind that repetition, though, there are panels that open and panels that only look like they open. The heart of the building is the vertical spine of the elevator and the stairwell. Guests do not see the spine. They ride through it, like a needle through cloth. The woman in the elevator has a name, though the name is not the one in the papers. We will call her Mira Holub, because it is close to the truth without touching it. She grew up 2 hours by train from the city, in a town with more bicycles than taxis. Her life in the months before this night is unremarkable in the most human way. She is a contract interpreter who strings together assignments, technical conferences, medical trainings, trade fairs. She keeps a small apartment in a block with a courtyard tree that sheds leaves into the gutter. She runs along the river when the weather permits. She writes reminders to herself on scraps of paper and tapes them near the door. Friends remember that she always charged her phone overnight and never missed a rent payment. In the week before she checked into the hotel, her calendar shows a cluster of bookings: a pharmaceutical conference in the city, a side meeting with a small biotech firm, and an evening lecture that she did not attend because she sent a polite cancellation. Payment records show modest transfers. There is no spike in spending. There is a single purchase in a hardware store for a box cutter and packing tape, which she used to seal crates of conference brochures for return shipping. She is practical about these things. She is careful about receipts. On the day she arrives at the hotel, the weather is cold and dry. Her transit card records a tap at a metro gate just after dawn, then a transfer to a tram that runs along the river. Later, a camera in the station hall catches her at a kiosk, buying a bottle of water and a pack of mints. The lobby camera shows her wheeling a small suitcase and wearing a dark coat, scarf tucked in. She checks in under her own name. The front desk assigns a room on an upper floor. She signs the form, accepts a key card, and asks for a late checkout. All of this is routine. Her room door opens at mid-morning. Housekeeping enters, cleans, and leaves fresh towels. The door opens again in early afternoon when she returns from the conference venue with a tote bag of materials and a paper cup of coffee. From that point, the timeline tightens. Phone records indicate short bursts of messages, mostly logistical: meeting times, a location pin from a colleague, a link to a session agenda. A call from her mother goes unanswered, then returned, then cut off. There is nothing tense in the traffic, nothing coded. By early evening, she exits the hotel alone. The outside camera shows her turning left toward the main avenue. She is gone for less than an hour. When she returns, she carries a plastic bag with a takeout container and a small pastry box from the bakery down the block. She eats in her room, leaves the tray on the desk, and sends a message to a friend that the conference has been dull, but useful. The elevator log shows one trip up to her floor around that time and no irregularities. The building is quiet. The last movement that matters begins later. She takes the elevator down. The camera in the lobby records her stepping out with her keycard in hand and a light jacket over her arm. She stops at the front desk. The doorman on duty, a man we will call Jan Vorel, stands near the door chatting with a taxi driver through the glass. He wears a uniform that does most of the work of authority. He smiles in a way that is courteous and bored. The footage does not show tension. It does not show anything besides the choreography of a late evening in a respectable place. Where she goes next is a short loop. Out to the sidewalk for air, a glance down the street, back inside. She studies the directory board near the elevators as if reminding herself what floor she is on, which is the kind of thing people do when they are tired or distracted. She steps into the elevator alone and turns to face the doors. The camera above the buttons watches the numbers rise. First floor, second, third. The counting is steady. At the fifth, there is a pause. The pause is too short to be an emergency. It is too long to be nothing. The door does not open. The car resumes and reaches the sixth, and then the seventh. The door opens and she does not step out. The door closes. The car returns to the lobby. When it opens there, it is empty. This is the image that anchors the case. An elevator ride that begins is interrupted by a breath of something, and then ends with the car empty of the person who started it. The next hours are dull in their ordinariness. The doorman stands near the door, scrolling on his phone. A couple from out of town returns and asks for an umbrella. A man in a suit orders a car to the airport. The lobby staff change shifts. The world continues. It takes time for the absence to be noticed. In the morning, housekeeping knocks at her door and receives no answer. They enter and find the bed used, the bathroom neat, the tote bag under the chair, the plastic pastry box in the bin. The key card last used the night before has not been used since. The front desk calls the room. No answer. Someone posts a note in the staff chat to keep an eye out. The hotel is not alarmed because people miss checkout all the time. People extend their stay. People slip out early. But this is different, and it will take too long for the hotel to understand that. By afternoon, a colleague from the conference sends a message asking if she is still coming for the closing session. There is no reply. The colleague, who is organized and persistent, calls the hotel. The hotel checks the room again and finds it unchanged. At that point, the front desk manager calls the municipal police. A patrol unit arrives, takes a brief statement, and notes that there is no sign of struggle or distress. The officer files a missing person report with standard language and requests that the hotel preserve all camera footage from the relevant period. This is one thing done right. The footage will become the spine of the investigation. There are also things done wrong. The hotel does not immediately restrict access to service areas. Staff continue their routines. A maintenance worker changes filters in the ventilation room on a floor above. Another employee wheels a cart of linens into a service corridor and leaves it there while helping a guest. The doorman finishes his overnight shift and goes home to sleep. The management does not ask him for a detailed log beyond the standard shift checklist. Hours pass. The city moves around the building like a river around a stone. Investigators begin with the obvious. They secure the room and collect the personal items left behind. A phone charger is plugged in by the bed. A lipstick is in a pocket of the jacket. The small suitcase is open on the luggage rack with clothes folded inside. There are no signs of packing in a hurry. They retrieve her phone records and request transit card logs. They speak with conference organizers, colleagues, and family. They walk the path between the hotel and the venue. In the hallway, they find nothing out of place. In the stairwell, there is a faint scuff near a maintenance door at a mid-landing between floors. But a scuff on a stair is not evidence, at least not by itself. They map the last day in blocks of time. Morning at the venue, afternoon in the room, evening out and back, elevator up, then that impossible blink, then an empty return. The digital log from the elevator's control system is pulled and reviewed. It shows routine movements, doors opening and closing, standard safety checks, but there is a flag near the time of her ride. A short stop in the shaft without a door cycle. The system registered a halt between the 5th and 6th levels for a handful of seconds, then a resume. According to the equipment vendor, such a pause could indicate calibration, a service call, or a door obstruction that cleared itself. According to the building plans, there is no place between the 5th and 6th where a door could open, even if it wanted to. The first pass at canvassing the area around the hotel is wide and unfocused. Officers check riverside paths and staircases that drop to the embankment. They speak with taxi drivers who took fares late that night. They request footage from nearby shops and find the usual night street patterns: a delivery truck, a group of students, a bicyclist with a bright rear light. None of these intersect with the woman's path after the elevator ride. It is as if her world shrank to the inside of the building and then collapsed. In the hotel, management cooperates, but the cooperation has edges. They turn over staff rosters and shift assignments. They hand investigators a binder with fire safety certificates and yearly maintenance checks. They allow access to the elevator machine room and to the control cabinet behind a locked panel in the lobby. The cabinet shows the lift's health as green across the board. During these inspections, the doorman's name surfaces simply because he was on duty. He is not singled out. He is simply there, in the footage near the door, part of the last hours when she is visible. He will become important later. Staff tell investigators that the building recently had cosmetic work done on the 5th floor corridor. New paint, new molding around the baseboards, a replaced section of carpet near the service door. These details are ordinary in hotels. High traffic areas need attention. But one officer, a woman with a habit of photographing everything and labeling the images immediately, notes that the molding paint on the 5th floor seems just a shade newer than elsewhere, and that the caulk line along a panel near the service door is cleaner than the worn line along the guest room doors. She writes it down and moves on. Digital evidence fills in more of the day. Her phone connects to the hotel Wi-Fi after she checks in and remains connected. Late that night, just minutes after the elevator ride, the device disconnects. That alone does not prove anything. Phones sleep, they drift, they drop networks when placed near certain types of wiring. The hotel's network logs are messy, not designed to support a police inquiry. Still, an IT technician pulls what he can and provides a rough list of device handshakes. One of them catches the eye of a more senior investigator days later. A staff device reconnects to a hidden network node labeled for maintenance at a time that overlaps with the elevator pause. The device belongs to the doorman. Meanwhile, the early theory that she might have stepped out unseen and met with someone in the neighborhood takes hold in the public conversation. People online claim a sighting at a cafe half a kilometer away. Others suggest she staged a disappearance to avoid something. These suggestions are easy to raise and hard to erase. Investigators chase them anyway because to ignore them would be worse. They find that the cafe sighting is a mistaken identity. They find that she bought a ticket for a train for the day after, which undercuts the idea of walking away. They find no financial stress, no sudden debts, no travel plans beyond routine life. Back in the building, the elevator becomes a character of its own. Technicians ride it up and down, testing for play in the doors, listening for tapping against the car walls that might indicate a misaligned guide. They manually stop the car between floors and open the interior emergency hatch to demonstrate that there is no way to exit the car into solid wall. The safety officer insists on cross-checking the hardware serial numbers against the original commissioning documents. Everything matches. Everything is correct. On paper, the building is honest. And yet the footage shows that brief hesitation between levels, and the logs confirm it, and the Wi-Fi traces suggest someone with staff privileges was moving through the spine of the building at the same time. Further, housekeeping recalls something small but strange. A small stripe of dust under the baseboard near the service door on the 5th level, as if the board had been removed and replaced recently. Dust like that is common in renovations. It is not common to see it just one night after a corridor already listed as complete. There is also the matter of the stairwell. In a mid-landing between two guest floors, there is a locked metal door with a placard that reads, "Simply Technical." The hotel provides a master key to investigators. Behind the door is a narrow space with a tangle of conduit, a fireboard, and an access hatch into the elevator shaft. The hatch is bolted from the inside and alarmed. The alarm log shows no breach at the time of interest. The bolt shows no sign of tampering. The puzzle deepens rather than resolves. The first real fault line in the hotel's story appears in the city building files. An inspector from the municipal office, a man from a different department than the police, brings the original architectural drawings. He spreads them on a table in a small conference room where the hotel's lawyer frowns and checks his watch. The drawings show a standard count of guest floors, with service rooms at the ends of the corridors and a mechanical penthouse above. The elevator shaft has doors on each guest floor and on the lobby. There is no notation for a landing or access between the 5th and 6th. The inspector also retrieves a more recent permit set for cosmetic upgrades on the 5th level. It shows paint schemes and carpet samples, but no structural changes. It is all by the book. Then someone asks a simple, dangerous question. If the elevator paused between listed floors, where exactly in the shaft would the car have been? The technician marks the position. The spot aligns with a band of wall that, if hollowed behind the plaster, could form a niche. The inspector shakes his head. There is no niche on the plan. The wall should be continuous, but plans describe intent. Walls describe reality. The team walks to the 5th floor corridor and measures the length from the stair core to the far end. They go up one level and measure the same. The numbers should match. They almost do. Almost. The difference is small, a hand's breadth. It can be explained away by the way walls are built and the way tape is pulled in old buildings. But once you see a difference, you cannot stop seeing it. In the lobby, the doorman watches the tape lines along the baseboards on the security monitor as if they are a race he cannot influence. He stands where he always stands. He holds his hands behind his back. He smiles at guests and reaches for the door. He is part of the furniture. He is also the one person with the kind of keys that open the kinds of doors that lead to the kinds of spaces where measurements shift. The first list of suspects is a practical one. Investigators look outward and inward at the same time. Outward means colleagues from the conference, a former roommate who now lives across town, a man she once worked alongside who still sends friendly messages. Inward means the staff who shared the building with her on that night, the managers who sign off on maintenance, the workers who move carts and keep keys. The outward group is tested with camera evidence, transit taps, and work calendars. The inward group is tested with time cards, internal access logs, and hallway footage. The outward group collapses quickly under the weight of common sense. A colleague who posted about the closing session appears on a tram camera far from the hotel at the crucial time. The former roommate is at a night shift in a bakery with a supervisor present and a time-stamped register file to prove it. The man who still sends cheerful messages is on a low-cost flight to a smaller city that evening, captured boarding on an airport camera and landing in a different region before dawn. Each of them is asked to walk through their day. The paths are ordinary. They do not cross the hotel's threshold. The outward line of inquiry narrows until it ends. Inside the building, the roster for the night includes a front desk clerk, a night manager covering administrative tasks, a maintenance technician on call but off-site, a housekeeper finishing a late turnover, and the doorman stationed near the entrance. Cameras place each one where they belong. The clerk is fixed behind the desk or stepping into the back office for short periods, always visible. The night manager is in the office for much of the time, then in the basement storage room checking inventory. The housekeeper is seen on the 6th level and later on the 3rd, pushing a cart that looks wider than the hall by an inch, which makes the images seem tighter than they are. Only the doorman spends time in both the lobby and the zone near the elevator and stair core, drifting between threshold and spine, the way a heart beats between chambers. He is not alone in having the means to reach behind the scenery. The maintenance technician has the trade skills. The night manager has the access. The clerk has the system passwords. But the doorman has something no one else has in the same way. A reason to watch everything and the plausible deniability of being just a helpful figure in a uniform. He is present when the elevator hesitates between floors. His staff device wakes a hidden network node near the spine at the same moment. He has the kind of pocket where a small magnet, a narrow key, or a short screwdriver could live without attracting attention. The forensic tools come out in layers rather than all at once. The first layer is the building itself. Plans are compared to actual walls. Inspectors measure runs and risers on the stairs, mark distances with tape, and note where the baseboard cut returns are too crisp for an older hallway. The second layer is digital. Wi-Fi handshakes are mapped as arcs on a diagram, showing where devices drift and reconnect. The third layer is physical trace. Uniforms are collected from the laundry service with consent and placed in paper bags. Shoes are photographed. Vacuum sweepings from the 5th floor corridor are saved. None of this is dramatic. It is careful and slow. An early surprise comes from the city, not the hotel. A citizen who runs a small blog about odd corners of the Pražný District posts a short entry about so-called missing halves of floors in older buildings. The entry includes a composite of fire escape diagrams and tourist photos, pointing out how sometimes a stair rail seems to skip a step in what should be a tidy pattern. The blog is not a source of proof, but it catches the eye of a junior investigator who sends the link up the chain. The team has already noticed the slight mismatch in corridor lengths. Now they have a set of images of vents and grills that do not align across floors. The blog author mentions a rumor among service workers of a fake landing used to stage luggage during renovations. A rumor is not fact, but it is enough to justify a more invasive look. The request to open walls is not granted lightly. The hotel's lawyer wants to avoid damage and disruption. The city inspector argues that safety code takes priority when plans in reality disagree in ways that could affect evacuation routes. The police want access because a person is missing. In the end, authorities obtain the legal authority to remove a selected section of panel on the 5th level near the service door where the caulk line still looks too new. A small team gathers in the corridor. A camera records the process. A carpenter scores the paint around what appears to be a single decorative panel. The first pull reveals that the panel is not decorative. It is a door skinned to look like a wall section, built with a proper frame and hidden hinges set deep. Behind it is a narrow landing, no wider than a stride, spanning the face of the elevator shaft. The space smells faintly of solvent and dust. A motion sensor switches on a strip of light along the ceiling that throws a clean glow over a patch of carpet. That carpet is not random. It matches the hotel hallway carpet in pattern and in wear. A framed print of a city bridge hangs on the wall at a height that echoes the prints elsewhere. A short stretch of baseboard carries a number plaque. It is not printed metal. It is molded plastic, made to look like metal. There is even a small sign with an arrow stuck to the wall with putty, the sort of sign that tells a tired guest that rooms continue to the left. Only here, there is nowhere to continue. The landing is a stage set that reproduces the look of a guest floor with just enough detail to convince a person stepping out of the elevator for a few seconds that they have arrived where they expect to arrive. At the inner edge of the landing is an opening to the shaft, closed by a sheet metal door with a safety lock. It is the kind of lock that should only open when the car is present. A small device sits next to it, wired into the lock body. It is a hinge tongue sensor bypass, the sort of thing a technician might use in a controlled test. Investigators bring the elevator vendor specialist to the scene. Under controlled conditions, with power isolated and safety protocols in place, the specialist demonstrates that the bypass can trick the system into believing the car is aligned when it is a fraction higher. Not an entire floor off, just enough so that a person inside the car sees a landing that looks proper and steps forward. The vendor stresses that this is not normal. This is a manipulation of a safety system. It is deliberate. The discovery reframes everything. The elevator's short pause between floors is no longer a glitch. It is a planned hesitation to align the car with a fabricated landing. The Wi-Fi handshake on the maintenance node during that window reads differently now. A staff device was likely in this exact pocket, moving in and out. The new baseboard paint, the fresher caulk, the corridor length mismatch, the rumor of a fake landing, the bypass on the lock, these are no longer scattered details. They are parts of a single idea. The landing is cleaned to a hotel standard, but even clean spaces tell stories. Investigators run a luminol mapping under low light. The blue bloom that sometimes appears in crime shows is not how it looks in reality, but small reactions show where wiping was hurried. Near the frame of the shaft door, faint arcs suggest that someone tried to clean in a hurry and missed thin lines along the hinge. The readings are subtle and screened by subsequent cleaning, so they are taken as suggestive, not definitive. A separate team lifts fibers from the carpet. Under a microscope, technicians find fibers that match the hotel's standard hallway weave, which is expected, and a thinner, lighter fiber consistent with a scarf brand she was known to wear. The match is not absolute, but it is another thread. Trace from uniforms produces something more direct. In the collar Velcro of the doorman's winter coat, a small tuft of carpet fiber matches the landing swatch not by general pattern, but by a rare dye lot used during a temporary run when the hotel bought replacement sections after a water leak a few seasons before. Records show that few spaces have that dye lot. The fifth level corridor and the landing do. The Velcro is a place where fibers like to hide. The coat had been laundered since the night in question, but Velcro grips and holds. The maintenance technician's jacket has fibers too, but they are from a different dye lot. The night manager's cardigan yields nothing. The clerk's shirt is plain cotton and tells no story. As the hidden landing yields its secrets, attention shifts back to the person who could have built it. The carpenter who opened the panel studies the framing and murmurs to the inspector about skill level. The cut lines are competent. The hinge choice is cheap but clever. The machining on the bypass plate is crude. It looks like the work of someone with access to the building and a practical mind, not a professional shop. Financial records shed more light. A series of small cash purchases at a neighborhood hardware store lines up with the period when the fifth level was repainted. Caulk, paint roller covers, hinge sets, magnetic latches, short lengths of aluminum channel. The receipts are in the store's ledger and captured in a low-resolution camera feed at the counter. The buyer wears a dark cap and a scarf pulled up. but the build resembles the doorman. The timing aligns with his off hours. The sums are small to avoid attention. Search history on the hotel's shared back office. Computer reveals visits to technical forums about elevator door interlocks and access hatch safety, read late at night when the office is empty. Logins used at those times include the doorman's generic staff account and the night manager's as well. It is possible that one person used another person's account. It is also possible that curiosity is shared in buildings where staff troubleshoot on their own. Still, the pattern is there. How to align a car manually. How to emulate a door interlock with a switch. How to reset an alarm without triggering a call to service. Utility anomalies add another thin layer. The 5th level's maintenance sink shows a short draw from the building's water system during the window after the elevator pause. The timing is close enough to matter. A splashed surface can be wiped, but pipes remember usage in the metering records. The draw is not large. It could be a rinse, a hand wash, a quick mop soak. Alone, it would mean nothing. In context, it hums like a low note in a song. All of this is presented to the hotel in a formal way. The lawyer grows more courteous as the evidence accumulates. The management agrees to a full inventory of keys. A master key set is missing one shaft access key that should be in a locked box. The log for that box shows a handwritten entry the week before for a test cycle. The name next to the entry is the doorman's. He has the training to open the front doors and to help guests when the lift stalls. He does not have the training to touch the shaft. The box is supposed to be double-signed. It was not. The night manager claims it was a busy week, short-staffed, and that sometimes procedures bend in the name of helping guests. That may be true in many hotels. In this one, it bent the wrong way. Investigators tailed the doorman quietly. He is not detained at this stage. He is a person of interest with duties and routines. He lives in a small flat on a street where laundry lines cross the courtyard like flags. He keeps a predictable schedule. He goes to a gym 2 mornings a week, meets a friend at a coffee stand near a tram stop, visits a pawn shop occasionally where he appears to sell small electronics. The pawn shop records are checked and show sales of an old camera, a vintage watch, and a tablet with a cracked screen. The items are ordinary. The timing of one sale stands out. The tablet sale happens the day after the woman was last seen. The device is traced to the hotel through a serial number etched into the back during an inventory cycle. The manager says the tablet was from a retired housekeeping cart and should have been recycled, not sold by an individual. The doorman says he was told to clear out old equipment. The manager denies this. The pawn shop records become a lever. There is a quiet decision to force a mistake. A controlled test is planned. Under warrant, the hidden landing is restored to how investigators found it, minus the bypass. Cameras and sensors are installed in the wall space. The doorman is placed back on his usual overnight schedule. The team wants to see whether he returns to the space. He does. Near the middle of the night, he leaves his position by the door and wanders along the 5th level in a way that looks like a security sweep. He pauses at the service recess. His hand slides along the baseboard. He presses a hidden latch and the panel releases. He steps into the landing and closes the panel behind him. He carries a small bag. The sensor records the motion, and the light in the landing rises to a dim level. He crouches at the shaft door and reaches for the interlock. He finds it unresponsive because the bypass is gone. He opens the bag and removes a small plate with wires and a magnet. At that point, the team steps in. The arrest is quiet and professional. There is no chase through corridors, no raised voices. He is escorted out while the landing remains lit. The bag contains the bypass plate, a folded section of towel, a small pry bar, a handful of screws, and a phone that is not registered to his name, a prepaid device purchased for cash. The panel is left open. Photographs are taken. In the bag is also a slim wallet that holds a guest key card with a room number from the 7th level. The key is dead, expired. but it should not have been in his possession. Later logs reveal it was the last card issued to her room. Housekeeping should have collected it from the desk. It made its way into his wallet. The prepaid phone is turned over to digital forensics. Though prepaid, it has a pattern. It has connected only to 2 towers regularly, the one that covers the hotel and the one near his apartment. It has made a handful of short calls to another prepaid device that pings in an industrial zone on the edge of the city. The number is traced to a small workshop that fabricates aluminum fixtures. The owner says he cuts pieces to customer spec with no questions asked. An order for short channel sections and thin sheet was filled in the period when the landing was built. Payment was cash. The buyer arrived wearing a uniform jacket, common in many service roles. The owner cannot pick a face from the array shown to him, but the order ticket is saved in a binder with a handwritten description of the dimensions that matches what was found in the wall. When confronted with the landing, the bypass, the pawnshop tablet, the key card in his wallet, and the footage of him returning to the space, the doorman asks for counsel. The story will not end here, because cases like this never end where they break. They move into papers in courtrooms and precise language that must be exact to hold. But the decisive moment has arrived. The hidden landing exists. It was used. It is linked to him by touch and by habit. The elevator pause is no longer a mystery. It is a function of a small, illegal machine that he controlled. He is led away while a team stays behind to peel back more of the wall, to follow the landing to a secondary hatch that opens into a technical chase, and to map the route a person could take to move from that landing down to a lower level without being seen. In that chase, they find something that belongs to her, a silver ring with a simple band, tucked under a lip of conduit, as if kicked there in a moment of movement. It is not a grand piece of evidence. It is small and personal, and it sits there like a line drawn under a paragraph. The ring is bagged and tagged. Later, it will be matched to photos from her social media, where she wore it on the same hand in picture after picture. In a small bin in a locked service cupboard near the landing, they find another item, a phone with a cracked case. It will be confirmed as hers. It no longer powers on. Its SIM is missing. Even without data, its existence inside a cupboard that only staff can open is a sentence written in solid nouns. The escalation that follows is administrative but powerful. The city closes the hotel pending a safety review. Guests are relocated. Code inspectors swarm the building and find smaller violations that were not part of the case, but matter to the public record. The hotel owners issue careful statements and hire a new law firm. The press takes the label that investigators used for the file and turns it into a headline. People online return to the blog that helped point toward the mismatch in the first place and leave messages about the danger of secret architecture. Some of those messages are thoughtful. Many are not. Behind the noise, the chain of evidence grows. A geospatial map is drawn that shows where her digital trail ended inside the building, while his activity clustered in the vertical spine. A financial timeline is built that shows small cash withdrawals that match small purchases that match the materials in the wall. Trace analysis matches the rare dye lot fiber from his coat to the landing. The luminol mapping suggests hurried cleaning. The water meter log catches a short draw from a sink near the landing. The bypass plate fits the interlock housing like a tailored tool. The last piece of the break comes from a place that is easy to overlook. The city permits office keeps not only stamped plan sets, but also the correspondence around them. In the correspondence around the cosmetic upgrade on the 5th level, a line mentions storage of materials in the service recess during painting. A day later, another line from the hotel asks a procedural question about whether the recess must be kept clear overnight if the door is locked. The reply is that service spaces must remain unobstructed if they are part of a path to a fire door. The rule is clear. The hotel acknowledges it. The timing of the exchange coincides with the week the landing was built. The correspondence does not prove intent. but it shows someone was thinking about that recess. At the same time, the small false space took shape. By the time winter light fades earlier each day, the case has a structure. The doorman built a set inside the walls, used a tool to bend a safety system for moments at a time, and created a place where a person could step when they believed a door had opened on the floor they expected. The set is dressed with borrowed details from the real corridor. The landing connects to a vertical chase that leads away from eyes. The evidence that binds the parts together is a braid of digital traces, fibers, small purchases, a key card, and the act of returning to the scene to check the machinery. With the arrest, the investigation crosses a threshold. What remains is to reconstruct motive, to find what can be found of what happened next in a way that respects fact over rumor, and to move from discovery to a courtroom strategy that can hold under the weight of law. Winter in the Pražný District arrived as a thin silver light on stone and glass, and with it, the slow weight of court calendars, filings, and careful language. The hotel's front doors were sealed under a city order, and the small brass handles that once felt showy stood behind a strip of official tape. Inside, the false landing had been stripped to bare framing and documented from every angle. The device that spoofed the elevator interlock sat in an evidence locker, its wires looped and labeled. The doorman, John Varel, moved from interview rooms to a holding facility and then into a process that would test every hinge of the case built against him. Prosecutors had more than a hidden space. They had a pattern of actions that made sense only if someone knew the building the way a craftsman knows the hollow parts of a wall. They had the bypass plate found in his bag when he returned to the landing, the key card from the woman's room folded inside his wallet, the prepaid device that breathed only in the hotel's shadow and near his apartment, the small cash purchases that matched the materials in the wall, and the rare carpet dye fibers clinging to the hook and loop of his collar. They had her ring from the technical chase and her phone from a locked service cupboard. They had the water draw from the 5th-level sink and the Wi-Fi handshake on the maintenance node during the exact window when the elevator paused between listed floors. Individually, each piece was a thin thread. Braided, they could carry weight. The defense answered with a story about misunderstood maintenance and a scapegoat in a uniform. The framed panel, they said, had existed in rough form for renovation staging. The bypass plate was a crude test tool used in an emergency months before. The key card could have been recovered from a lost and found drawer. The fibers were transfer from any hallway sweep. The prepaid phone had no subscriber name and therefore no identity. The housekeeping tablet had been marked for disposal. The ring, the phone, the sink draw, the Wi-Fi hiccup, each could be explained away or buried under doubt. If the elevator hesitated, perhaps it was calibration, they argued. If plans and walls did not match, perhaps the building had been altered legally. But the paperwork lagged, and most forcefully of all, without a recovered body, without a direct witness, the narrative required belief in a chain of inference, not a single incontrovertible point. A court does not weigh stories like a cafe conversation. It weighs them against standards written in statutes and tempered by precedent. The courtroom phase began with motions over admissibility. The blog post about odd corners of the district was ruled out as evidence, but allowed as context for investigative leads. The vendor's demonstration of how the bypass could trick the interlock was admitted with limits. It could be shown as a possibility under controlled conditions, not as a reenactment of someone's act. The luminol mapping images were admitted with cautionary explanation that such reactions are suggestive, not proof of blood. The chain of custody for the ring and phone was carefully narrated, step by step, corridor by corridor, glove by glove. Witnesses spoke in the patient language of craft and duty. The elevator specialist explained the normal logic of doors, hatches, and safety circuits, and the abnormal moment when a short plate and a magnet convince a machine that a door is aligned when it is not. The city inspector mapped the plan set to the walls, pointed to where lengths did not quite agree, and described how surface finishes had been used to erase an entrance. A forensic technician held up the doorman's coat and described how certain fibers find refuge in the grip of a fastening strip. The hardware shop owner recalled small cash purchases at odd hours and the polite anonymity of a uniformed buyer. The pawnbroker laid out a ledger and confirmed the sale of a housekeeping tablet that should have been decommissioned by the hotel and not carried in by an individual. A hotel manager described key control procedures and the breach of those procedures on the night when the shaft access key left its box with a single improper signature. The defense pressed on every seam. If a panel looked like a door, might a contractor have created it before the doorman worked there? If a bypass could be bought or improvised, might another staff member have used one? If a ring and phone were found in service spaces, might they have been left there by someone else and only later discovered? If Wi-Fi logs showed a handshake on a hidden node, might logs have been incomplete or misinterpreted? If a sink drew a small measure of water, might that draw have been housekeeping or a painter, not a perpetrator? They pointed to the maintenance technician's jacket fibers from a different dye lot and suggested a chorus of tradesmen working in the same zone. They nodded toward the night manager's lax key control and suggested negligence rather than malice. Alongside testimony came a reconstruction drawn entirely from tangible acts. The woman had stepped into the elevator and risen. The car had hesitated between the 5th and the 6th at a position that aligned exactly with the false landing. A plate had sat inside a metal housing, masquerading as part of a safety chain and allowing a door to open when the car kissed a mark that was high by a fraction. In that moment, the landing presented itself as a familiar hallway, a framed print, a run of carpet, a small sign. A person expecting a corridor would step forward while the door traveled out and back. In that step was the trick. What happened after that step had to be told without spectacle and without assumption. The technical chase beyond the landing had room to move. It led down past the back faces of the guest floors to a service level used for laundry carts, linens, and bins. From there, a staff exit opened to a sheltered loading nook off a narrow side street. The prepaid device pinged within that path. The sync draw matched the window between the pause and the disconnection of the woman's phone from the hotel network. The ring's resting place under a conduit lip sat exactly along the route where a hand might brush metal in a tight pass. Her phone lay later in a cupboard that only staff could open with a master key. The key card to her room sat in the doorman's wallet. The landing's carpet held scarf fibers consistent with her clothing and the rare dye lot that matched the swatch from his collar. Investigators had considered other paths, and those considerations were put into the record so that the court could see the doors that were closed before the case walked through the one that remained. They had asked whether she had left the hotel after the elevator ride through a blind spot. Transit gates showed no taps. Street cameras showed no trace. Taxi logs offered no matching fare. They had asked whether an acquaintance could have walked her out through the staff exit. Staff key swipes did not align, and no guest card could open that door without registering on the control system. They had asked whether she had fallen into the river that winter night. Patrols swept the embankments, and the river police logged no recovery. They had asked whether the maintenance technician could have built the landing alone. He lacked access to the key box and did not show on the maintenance node logs. They had asked whether anyone else from the outward circle had motive or proximity. The outward paths collapsed under timestamps and distance. Each what-if weakened under light. The defense offered a different what-if, that the doorman's return to the landing on the night of his arrest was curiosity rather than intent. A nervous man checking something that everyone in the building quietly knew existed. The court had to decide whether the bag he carried, fitted with a replacement bypass plate and a strip of towel, looked like curiosity or like preparation. It also had to decide whether the alignment of so many small acts could be coincidence. The absence of a recovered body was the hardest gravity in the room. families find closure in a grave, and courts find comfort in directness. Here, there was only a careful reconstruction and objects that had touched a life before they were found in places where they did not belong. The law, however, allows for conviction in cases where the mosaic holds its image when each tile is counted and placed. The prosecution argued that the sequence, the pause, the landing, the technical chase, the staff exit, the removal of a phone's identity chip, the disposal of a device, the retention of a key card, the later return to tend the mechanism, looked nothing like accident and everything like a plan. The defense tried to stretch each tile until the picture blurred. The court watched and listened. When judgment came, it was written without flourish. The court found that the doorman used a fabricated landing and a manipulated interlock to remove a guest from a common space into a controlled service area without recording her passage on ordinary logs, and that he then moved her along a staff path out of sight and out of safety. It found that he tampered with evidence by removing and hiding her phone's identity, and by returning later to adjust the mechanism. It found that the chain of circumstantial evidence was strong enough to support the conclusion that she died as a result of his acts and that he concealed where and how. He was convicted of unlawful confinement leading to death, tampering with safety systems, and obstruction of justice. The sentence stretched across years long enough to outlast the new carpet that would one day cover the scars on the fifth-level corridor. The numbers were said aloud in court, but the important part was not the count. It was the cancellation of his habit of moving unnoticed inside thresholds. The hotel did not escape untouched. The city imposed fines for concealed alterations, for inaccurate plans, and for failures in key control. More important than fines, a wave of policy followed. The municipal council passed an ordinance requiring annual physical audits of vertical shafts in lodging structures with independent verification that any door that looks like a door opens to a real corridor, not a set. Cosmetic panels installed adjacent to life safety systems now require a certification tag readable by inspectors and recorded in a city database. Door interlock devices must carry tamper-evident seals. Breaking a seal now triggers a mandatory service call and alerts the fire brigade. Hotels must retain network handshake logs for a period measured in seasons rather than weeks. Key control boxes now require dual authentication rather than a single signature. In plain terms, the city tightened the seams where shadows like to live. There were quieter changes. Housekeeping carts in many hotels in the district now carry small cameras that record the act of entering service cupboards and technical rooms, not to surveil workers, but to create a time-stamped record of who opened what and when. Doormen across the river learned, through training modules and peer talk, that their hospitality did not include unguided authority in mechanical spaces. The blog that had once mused about odd corners of old buildings turned its curiosity toward safety advocacy, publishing simple guides on how to read a fire map and how to notice when a decorative panel seems too knowing for its frame. For the woman's family, closure did not mean forgetting. A small plaque appeared on a bench by the Voltara, a quiet piece of metal that did not say what happened, only that a life touched these stones. It became a place where people who knew her, and people who only knew her through headlines, could sit and look at water moving toward a sea and think about how the city can be both beautiful and sharp. The hotel reopened after months of work. The fifth-level corridor returned to its normal dimensions, with no secrets behind the paint. The landing that had been a stage was replaced by proper wall, and the seam was built in a way that would betray any future tamper to the naked eye. Inspectors ran their hands along the baseboards and smiled without celebration, because in this line of work, satisfaction arrives quietly or not at all. Guests returned to sleep under duvets and to overpay for minibar snacks, which is the way hotels make peace with their utility. There were things the case could not solve. It could not plot the last minutes inside the chase with the exactness that families ache for. It could not answer the question that lingers in any tragedy about whether a single minute's difference would have led to a different end. It could not erase the mistake of the hotel's early hours, when access to service spaces remained loose, but it could draw a line from a deceptive piece of architecture to a man's deliberate maintenance of that deception and assign responsibility. In the years that followed, other cities looked at the ordinance and copied parts of it. A travel association published a brief suggesting that guests glancing down a hallway should not trouble themselves with paranoia, but that they could take simple comfort in knowing that inspectors now count frames and measure runs in places where nobody thinks to measure. The term decoy floor entered the lexicon as a warning, not as a template. Many people forgot which hotel and what year. Practitioners did not. The case file, labeled with the same name that became a headline, passed into training programs for inspectors and elevator technicians who used it to explain why small violations are sometimes a symptom of something larger. As for Jan Vorel, he became an example of a very old story in a very modern setting, a person who found power in thresholds and was undone by the same. The uniform that helped him move through space like furniture was surrendered, folded in a plastic bag, tagged, and placed in a box that would sit on a shelf for years. Inside that box were fibers that once clung to a secret landing. Inside a different box were items that had lived in a young woman's pockets, now dry and cataloged. The last image is not of a handcuffed man or a courtroom. It returns to the rectangle of light where this story began. The elevator doors open on a real corridor. The camera above the buttons watches the numbers change with the metronome patience of a machine that only knows up and down. There is no pause between floors that exists only on paper. There is only a smooth rise through space that has been verified with a tape measure and a city seal. On the 5th level, a housekeeper steps out with a cart, pushes forward, and vanishes around a corner. The door closes. The car descends. The light fades. The label on the case file is placed back on a shelf. Her last minutes, the Hotel Doorman case. It is no longer a mystery. It is a lesson pinned to a wall so that others can see where the seam once opened and how it was closed.